Huh. Okay. Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. Thank y'all again for coming over. We are back on the Grunge channel. Very, very interesting topic because I'm just wondering what myths they're talking about. So, myths you can stop believing about the Beatles. All right. I see down here it says something about Paul. That's crazy. That's crazy. All right. Hey, again, appreciate you guys coming over. Make sure you guys check out the Grunge channel. They got a lot of great videos over here, man. I'm excited to get to this, so we ain't gonna waste no more time. Shout out to all the good humans. Link is always in the description. Let's jump right into it.
Everyone knows Yoko Ono broke up the Beatles, but what if everyone was wrong? From rumors about Pete Best's firing to the meaning behind that infamous Butcher cover, these are the Fab Four myths you need to stop believing. According to a story written by Fred Laborde and published in Michigan Today in October 1969, Paul McCartney was not only dead, he had been dead for years. The story alleged that the Beatles bassist was killed in a 1966 car accident and replaced with a lookalike.
Hey, let me tell you something. And I ain't saying this stuff is true or nothing, but boy, hey, have you ever seen those videos about the clones? Ooh-wee. Hey, go check that out. All I'm saying is nothing would surprise me. Said he was replaced. That's the same thing they said about Kevin Hart in his car accident. Said that he was replaced. That there is no way he was able to walk out of that car accident. All right. This is crazy.
Beatles bassist was killed in a 1966 car accident and replaced with a lookalike. The piece contained over 24 clues, all of which Laborde made up. Laborde told True West magazine in 2008, "I wanted to poke fun at overzealous critics who try to find endless meaning in every nuance of an art project. I thought then, and in fact still do, that this was funny. Almost everybody else took it seriously, but Laborde also had an ulterior motive for writing the piece." He told AL.com, "I always thought I could have made some money off of it at Beatle conventions, but I didn't. But now it's amusing to my children."
That was a hoax, right?
Rest in peace, Chris.
Yeah, I wasn't really dead.
Another Beatles myth had to do with the often believed rumor that Yoko Ono broke up the band. Lennon admitted that his relationship with Ono was the final nail in the coffin of his marriage to Cynthia Powell.
Every time I do a Beatles, or when I was like reacting to them, that's all people would say in the comments about her. So let's see what that's a lot of people would say that, and I'm pretty sure people gonna be in this video gonna be like, she did.
But breaking up the Beatles? Not so. There's no question that John trusted Yoko's artistic judgment and relied on her support and affirmation. After all, Yoko was the only spouse allowed into recording sessions. But as CNN reports, the band was already starting to fragment when Ono appeared on John's arm. McCartney himself told David Frost in an interview, "She certainly didn't break the group up. The group was breaking up." So why did the Beatles ultimately break up? Well, part of the reason was artistic differences, and part of it was money. Of course, another huge factor in the band's eventual demise was simple exhaustion. In 1960, Pete Best became the Beatles' permanent full-time drummer. Best joined the group for its months-long stint, performing gigs in Hamburg, Germany. However, when the Beatles signed a record deal in 1962, Best's bandmates decided that it was time for him to leave the group. After the Beatles obtained lasting global popularity, rumors about Best's exit persisted. Some theories suggested that Best wouldn't cut his hair into the standard Beatles mop top. Others said that he didn't get along with his bandmates, but according to Beatles biographer Larry Kane, Best was fired because he got more attention from women than his bandmates. Kane reported this story as fact in various books about the Beatles, as well as in Parade magazine. However, the reasons behind Best's firing likely came down to one thing: music. Early on, Beatles producer George Martin told the band's manager, Brian Epstein, that Best's drumming wasn't good enough to record. Strangely enough, Best himself agreed. The former Beatles drummer told the Irish Times in 2020, "You're the Beatle who got kicked out because you were crap." Urged along by manager Brian Epstein, the Beatles approached multiple record labels in the early 1960s. All of them, including Pi, Philips, and Decca, said no. But then EMI signed the group by way of George Martin, who was the president of the subsidiary label Parlophone. Martin recognized and embraced the band's potential for greatness, thus beginning a long and fruitful relationship. As the Beatles' producer, George Martin managed and shaped the band's musical output. He also pushed the band to take artistic risks and adopt new recording technologies. However, while it's true that George Martin got on board with the Beatles quickly, he wasn't all that keen on the band at first. He thought their demo was terrible and recommended that they find a better drummer.
And I said to Brian Epstein, when we do the next session, I'm going to provide the drummer.
Even then, Martin thought his arrangement with the Beatles would be brief. George Martin biographer Kenneth Womack told Forbes he then intended to record 6 record sides and then be done with them. On February 9, 1964, the Beatles performed on The Ed Sullivan Show, and some 73 million viewers watched the CBS broadcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles!
The band's performance on the show became the most watched TV program in the US and would remain so for years. However, that first show in February 1964 was such a watershed moment that it overshadowed the band's previous appearances on American TV. According to CBS News, Brian Epstein pitched American news networks on running stories about his clients, who were the UK's hottest rising stars at the time. CBS News' London correspondent, Alexander Kendrick, was sold. Kendrick then filed a report on the band, which aired on CBS Morning News with Mike Wallace on November 22, 1963. The piece would have repeated on CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite that evening, but the breaking news of President Kennedy's assassination took precedence. CBS went on to air Kendrick's segment once again on December 10, 1963. Ed Sullivan just happened to be watching that piece, which prompted him to book the Beatles on his show. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that points to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds being about drugs. Not only are the lyrics loaded with fantastical psychedelic imagery about tangerine trees and marmalade skies, but the first few letters in the title spell out LSD, a popular hallucinogenic substance. The Beatles even released the song in 1967, which was a year when the band was freely experimenting with drugs. And yet, that's all a matter of interpretation. John Lennon attested that the song was inspired by a piece of artwork made at school by his 4-year-old son, Julian. On the Dick Cavett Show in 1971, Lennon denied that the song's title contained a code pro-drug message, telling the host, "It never was, and nobody believes me. My son came home with a drawing and showed me this strange-looking woman flying around. I said, 'What is it?' He said, 'It's Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.' I thought, that's beautiful. I immediately wrote a song about it." The story checks out. According to the New York Times, young Julian Lennon attended school with a classmate named Lucy O'Donnell, who likely influenced the inspirational drawing. John Lennon had a sense of humor, but he also had a mean streak. One of the most famous examples of his acerbic wit is a quip he supposedly levied at a fellow Beatle. The story goes like this. Back in the 1960s, a reporter whose identity is lost to time asked Lennon if he thought Ringo Starr was the best drummer in the world. According to the Los Angeles Times, Lennon allegedly responded, "He's not even the best drummer in the Beatles," while writing Tune In, The Beatles, all these years. Beatles historian Mark Lewison tried to pinpoint the origins of the quote. According to Lewison, the London Times printed the quote and put it into circulation. However, the quote didn't actually come from Lennon or anyone remotely involved with the Beatles. It didn't even originate during the 1960s. Lewison traced the nasty comment to an October 1981 episode of Radioactive, a BBC Radio 4 sketch comedy show. It was the actor Philip Pope who said it on the show.
Maybe Ringo Starr wasn't the best drummer in the world. All right, maybe he wasn't the best drummer in the Beatles, but he's a name.
In 1966, the Beatles' American label, Capitol Records, released Yesterday and Today.
I'm just wondering how much of this stuff you guys have heard. Like, like your hardcore Beatles fan, because myths and all this stuff. I just feel like whenever there's a band, it is always going to be some type of drama just because somebody might be getting more attention and it's going to be something always. But boy, it just seemed like they were just going through it, man, and they were young and then they got tired and then money and just so much. You just don't know what to believe.
The album was a compilation of singles and tracks that were held over from albums the band had released in the UK only. Most record buyers got a copy in a sleeve with a generic photo of the Fab Four standing around a trunk, but there's a rare and highly valuable alternate version of Yesterday and Today that also exists. In this version, the album's sleeve features a gruesome image of the Beatles. The band is covered in bloody doll parts and meat on the cover, so that they resemble butchers. However, this rare edition was quickly removed from circulation. This led to a rumor that the so-called butcher cover was a message to Capitol. According to the Beatles as musicians, Revolver through Anthology, the band was telling the record label to stop butchering their UK albums for American fans. Here's what really happened. In 1966, the Beatles sat for the butcher-themed photo session with artist Robert Whittaker. When Capitol wanted a cover image for Yesterday and Today, the band sent in one of the photos that Whittaker took. Multiple high-ranking Capitol employees balked, but the Beatles held a lot of clout. Paul McCartney also claimed that the photo was a reflection of the group's opinion of the Vietnam War. Capitol printed a full run of Yesterday and Today and sent out thousands of advance copies to record stores around the country. However, many of the stores refused to sell the LP as was. As a result, the Beatles authorized Capitol to recall, revise, and reprint the sleeves. In late 1969, John Lennon announced he was leaving the Beatles. Paul McCartney followed suit in 1970, effectively splitting up the group. But unlike many other classic rock bands who eventually reunited with their full original lineups, the Beatles never did.
The inevitable question.
Are they ever going to get back together?
Yeah.
Of course, Lennon's assassination in 1980 prevented a full Beatles reunion from ever occurring, but according to the Washington Post, the Fab Four were on good enough terms to start planning a charity concert reunion right before Lennon's murder. In the years after Lennon's death, the three surviving members of the band came together on more than one occasion. Paul McCartney contributed to multiple Ringo Starr albums, and as recently as 2019, the two performed together live. In 1981, Starr and McCartney joined George Harrison on his single, All Those Years Ago. Furthermore, the New York Times reported that in 1998, Paul, George, and Ringo sang together at the funeral of McCartney's wife, Linda. And in 1995, 25 years after splitting up, the Beatles scored their final original top 10 hit in the US. With Free as a Bird, the three surviving Beatles recorded the new track to accompany a vocal demo left behind by Lennon.
Hey. So much drama, man. I just feel like, every band is going to have their ups and downs. It's supposed to build like chemistry, but like the ones that have the drama and can't get back together, man. I know they'd be missing out on a lot of money, man. But then you got to think about how much money was being taken from them. It's people be slimy, man. Hey, again, appreciate you guys coming over. Don't know how much of this you guys knew, if this was news to you, whatever. Appreciate y'all. Shout out to the Grunge channel again for the video, man. Peace out.